we'll bring the, City of Kingman meeting of Municipal Utilities Commission together today. We would do a roll call.
Chairman Burgett and Commissioner Orr are excused. Vice Chairman Parker?
Here.
Commissioner Shuffler? Absent. Commissioner Van Zant?
Here.
Commissioner Retberg?
Here.
Commissioner Yarish?
Here.
And Council Liaison Nelson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so did everybody get a chance to read the minutes? Do we have any questions, comments on the minutes? We have a motion.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Okay. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Ayes carry it. Okay, second, we've got consideration for public comments. Those wishing to address the Municipal Utilities Commission need not request permission in advance. Action taken as a result for public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter and rescheduling the matter for consideration and discussion at a later time pursuant ARS 38-431. Do we have any comments from the public? Anybody here from the public? No? Okay. Move forward. Okay, item 3, reports. Greg, do we have reports from staff on past actions taken?
Just very briefly, good evening, Vice Chairman and Commissioners. Last month, the Commission approved the sewer variance for the Royal Vista subdivision, the Royal Ranches. That went to Council on July 16th, and the Council approved that unanimously. Hopefully we'll see some development on that subdivision sometime in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Very awesome. Mr. Orr was there, and he had some comments there for...
That's correct.
Yes.
Mr. Toby Orr was there. He did speak to the Council on the item and tried to give the basis and the reasoning behind this Commission's vote and recommendation, which he did. Council approved it.
Awesome. Doesn't always happen, right?
Item B was the water service approval for the commercial building at 2400 Airway Avenue. That was approved on the Council consent agenda unanimously. No questions of staff at the July 16th Council meeting. So more commercial development. And that concludes what I have on the reports. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
No?
Of course.
Okay, we'll move on to item 4, new business for Commission. Review and recommendation of a request for water service to an unsubdivided parcel 330-20-011. Nick Main of Main Construction has submitted a request for the water service to unsubdivided parcel 330-20-011. The applicant intends to construct a single-family residence on this property.
Good evening again. So I have on the graphic up here which shows the property in question. It's 597 acres. It's located west of Stockton Hill Road, south of Camelback Boulevard, west of the Camelback subdivision, the Kingman Camelback subdivision. The terrain is rather varied. There's rather a lot of hills and peaks on this property. The elevation is such that see in the map to the north of Camelback Boulevard is the water tank that serves that area below here, Kingman Camelback, and the area both east and west of Stockton Hill Road. The property in question is at or above that elevation, so that tank will not serve the property. There would have to be, and we do have a water report that Mr. Nick Main and his engineer Ray Stadler prepared and submitted, indicating that there would have to be some booster pumps both to serve the pressure of the proposed home as well as to boost pressure for a fire hydrant that will be required within 500 feet of the new home as well. The applicant has indicated at this time he's only looking to construct one single-family home on this property. Although in some of the discussions he did indicate that he may choose to subdivide this later on and create some additional lots. Our minimum water pressures that the city provides by our regulations are 40 psi static at the water meter, and the fire hydrant would have to provide 500 gallons per minute fire flow, and it would have to be located within 500 feet of the home with an acceptable, driveway or access between the hydrant and the home for the fire department, and it would have to provide that 500 gallons per minute flow under all conditions with a minimum residual of 20 psi in the water system. The applicant and engineer have submitted a report indicating that they would be able to do that with some booster pumps. A copy of that report is in your packet there. Let me go through. I have additional photos here. So that's the general photo of the site. This one kind of shows the contours, the elevation relief in relation to the existing Camelback tank and the proposed home site. This is just a photo looking west from the intersection of Shane Drive and Jagerson Avenue. This is the Camelback Boulevard looking west from the intersection of Christie Drive and Camelback Boulevard. You can see maybe not on that picture you can't, but hopefully in your back you can see the water tank on the right side of this photo up the hill, and then the new home would be constructed on the left side of the picture here. And then this picture is just a photo looking kind of south towards where the home would be built. It's maybe hard to tell from the photo, but there's already some grading going on up there where the home is kind of in the middle of the picture there. There's a few other challenges that are worth noting, possible conditions that the Commission would consider for approval. One is the street improvement ordinance. Back in 2016, the City Council passed ordinance number 1813, which stated that anytime anyone within the city limits desires to build a home, if they're not already adjacent to a street that's maintained by the city, they have to improve that street back to the nearest paved road that the city maintains. In this case, the nearest paved road would be Camelback and Christie, where the pavement ends there. And so there's quite a distance of street improvements that would be required for the ordinance in order to develop and build this home. There's also the hillside ordinance, which is planning and zoning follows. Basically, any time the lot has a slope greater than 15%, there's some development rules that would limit the amount of grading that can occur on that lot. And there's some flat areas here, and I'm not sure, to be honest, whether the area that he is proposing to build this home would necessitate the need for the requirement of the hillside ordinance, but I just want to at least make the applicant aware and the Commission aware that that might be something that would be necessary to develop this area as well. And then there's the underground ordinance and the Kingman master plan. Underground ordinance basically states that any secondary power access would have to come underground to the home. As you can see from the photos, it's potentially rocky areas. So again, I just want to make put everything out there so that Mr. Main and Ray Stadler are here, so they'll probably want to come speak to the commission on this. But I've listed these as possible conditions, again, just to make sure that we're communicating everything up front when it comes to building a home on this property. There are a few challenges. In the master drainage plan, there's some drainage that comes through there. We've had some complaints from some of the residents downstream, so we just want to make sure that the drainage continues as it has historically. I think that's all concludes everything I was prepared to say. So I'll be happy to answer any questions if there's any questions.
What's the distance on street improvements are you looking at? You know?
So from Camelback and Christie, on the upper side of the photo there, to just past the Camelback tank, I believe it's about maybe 1,400 feet, 1,400 linear. It's a typical, so prior to that ordinance, it was always a typical requirement that someone at least has to provide an all-weather access for emergency vehicles to get up to home. Again, the new ordinance came into effect, I think, March or May of 2016.
So as far as the cost incurred in doing these improvements to get utilities to his potential home site, who's burdened by that?
The property owners or the developer is typically the one that's burdened with.
So pumps and everything that's involved in getting what he needs up to occupy.
Now, if there was some reason for the city to want to upsize those pumps, then we thought there was some future growth or development that could occur in that area, then potentially the city could participate. At this point, I'm not aware of any reason for the city.
Is there realistic potential for development in that area as far as?
So as we go further west, it becomes BLM land,
Okay.
but there is some land on the north side of Camelback that's privately owned that could be potentially developed. I would say no on the BLM land. Technically, a private person can't come by that. The only way that can be acquired is by trading some other land.
So is there a recommendation, I'm sorry if I missed it, is there a recommendation by staff?
Yeah, so we would recommend approval of the water service and with the conditions that are listed.
Oh, okay. So that the engineering meet the 500 gallons per minute on the fire flow, that there is a PSI of 40 or greater there at the residence, right?
Yep.
Okay. With a pressure tank of some sort? And that's all the homeowner's burden as far as responsibility for putting in?
Well, as well as the other conditions that are already in place by adopted council ordinances.
Okay.
And the homeowner's willing to take all of this on?
Well, the homeowner's here, so I'll let him answer that. But he certainly can speak to that effect. So
We'd like to hear from you if you'd like to come up and...
My wife Amy is here as well. We own the property together. It's not owned by the business, it's owned by us personally. We always had intentions of just building one home at their approximate home site. Initially, when we were doing all of our planning and talking to engineering and whatnot, our intention was always to drill a well a little bit north above it. There's an old raised road in there that would be probably about 20 feet higher in elevation than the home site. And our original intention was to drill a well and have storage tanks up there and then have gravity feed down to the house. It was never an intention to tap into a 16-inch line off the city tower. So when we were going to get our house permits, they raised the concern about having to have fire prevention or having to go through mud for the utility, even though we were going to be drilling a well. And originally I was told that I wouldn't have to mess with going to mud. So we started that process, and then they wouldn't issue the permits because they wanted us to do it first. So in that process, we had closed on our other home, so we lived the days in then, and we're still trying to do this to prepare for the one home site. So what has metamorphosed into having a well with storage tanks, now we're improving booster pumps coming off of Camelback, and then there's also talk about street improvements. When we never intended to come off of Camelback for our house site, we intended to come off of Jaggerson, which would be the nearest maintained Kingman City street. Camelback is not maintained except for back to Christie. We never intended to do 1,500 feet of road improvements from Christie all the way up and then come across to our house. We would not have bought the property. The city ordinance does state that's for subdivisions that you would maintain that Camelback all the way back to the asphalt, but it says for developing that you would go back to the nearest city maintained asphalt street. So that was always our intention, to go from Jaggerson. We only have about 300 feet to our main entrance gate. And then we had talked to Keith Eaton about if we had to do a fire hydrant extension, that we would cut a road at an angle across so that it was within the 500 feet to the house. And then we would maintain that road on our property in future, any need for fire access. So we drew the design up based on coming across with the needs for fire if we were tapped into city water, but it was never our intention to be on water city. It was always our intention to be on a well with storage capacity up to 20 or 30,000 gallons of storage, and then have it boosted downhill and have more than enough pressure for fire. So that's kind of a backlog of all the things that have been going on. So if it was my preference, I would go with the initial idea of staying away from tapping into the city line and having the well with storage tanks. And if something didn't work out with that, we couldn't achieve the pressure that was designed for that, then we would do that, tying into that 16-inch line off the tank as a secondary. But it wouldn't be my first preference.
So it sounds like there's been a lot of negotiations as far as how that water line is going to look. Is that right, Greg? And what we see on the agenda?
There's also a huge area for developing. There's 70 acres on that block. There's 30 there. There's all the area around that tank is privately owned by AMPAC and a bunch of other developments. BLM doesn't start uphill up to where the mines are, and it's way behind there. But that whole area in there is the rest of what was privately owned after Camelback was developed. So that's why that tank was strategically placed right in the center of that developed area. But some of it is uphill from the tank, so it would have to get boosted.
Is that property in the service area, water service area? For the city of Kingman?
Subject property?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yes.
It's in the
Okay.
city limits, yes.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Main did come to the city some time ago, to the engineering, and asked about whether it would be okay to drill a private well. He was told, well, that we could not prevent him from drilling a private well, but that if he wanted to build a house, he would have to connect to the city's water system, because that is the policy and the utility regulations. When you build a home in the city limits, you connect to the city water system.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense to me, just because that water is pristine, it's tested, it's approved, you're within the city, and it just kind of makes sense to me.
Well, and it's reliable. Yeah, I don't.
I agree with the consideration of single-family residence. The amount incurred with expense, that has to be taken into consideration of what you pay just to get water to one house. We're not developing.
Right. It sounds like there's a little bit of a conflict here, though, as far as what's on the agenda and what you're actually representing. So I'm not even too sure how we would even comment, because it looks like you're looking for a consideration from us with regards to just approving the water system coming into your property, and then you encumbering that extension with pumps, the fire flow, the required pressure to the house. So if you're looking for a waiver to...
I'm not looking for a waiver. I think that putting in the hydrant booster pumps good idea. I just don't. I'm not acknowledging the brought up.
Yeah, I don't even think that's for this commission anyway, so,
So, just the original plans, the design for the water pumps is fine.
So you're not looking for any kind of variance on what the city ordinances are at this point? It's just not listed that way?
If I was looking for a variance, what would I need to do that, and what are the chances of getting it? If I wanted to set a different design for fire prevention, well, go that route. What would be the? I haven't done this before as far as waiting for the city. Usually it's happened in the city water. This is kind of a unique site.
It is.
So, while I don't want to stall my living, current living conditions, I also don't want to jump into something that's very costly.
Right.
So, if we wanted to have a different design drawn up by Ray Stadler, of having the well and storage tanks and talking to Keith about what would be the amount of storage for fire prevention, if we wanted to go that route, is that a possibility?
Well, it would be a process, from what I understand, you'd have to apply for that variance to go through that process and attempt to get that approved. Otherwise, at this point, the way it's listed on the agenda is that review and recommendation of request for water service to subdivided properties, it would mean that you were basically accepting all the requirements by the city ordinances to make that happen. Otherwise, you'd have to apply for a variance to deviate from that, if I'm understanding correctly.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
from a design standpoint, I don't know, maybe Mr. Stadler wants to comment on it, but whether or not you get the water from the city of Kingman at the curbside or 200 feet underneath the ground, you're still having to pump and provide storage, are you not?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, you know, water is water once you get it there, and then what, and how much to store it, and where those flows come from, whether they're underground or from another storage tank.
It is, but the tank being at 20 or 30 feet lower in elevation, having booster uphill, definitely not as easy as being 20 or 30 feet higher in elevation, pumping downhill. It's definitely less costly, and you're not paying 3 or 4 cents a gallon for water in the well. But it's, aside from the cost of the well will probably be cheaper. It's less strain on the pumps pumping it downhill. That's why that tank is placed there, because it's a gravity-feed tank.
Right.
It's gravity feeding down the Camelback. That's how they create the pressure. That was the design that I had initially intended for that lot.
Well, I would entertain, if you want to draw it up that way and maybe show some justification on how that's going to be a burden to you and bring it back to MUC if that's what you're looking to do. But I'd rather have it written up properly so that we could vote on it so that it makes sense.
And I mean, it's very brought up as I'm showing the pressure as a holding tank.
So you want to move forward as it's written up on the agenda?
We can come up with a plan for building park. Maybe city players.
My only concern with the well is there's no known whether it would be suitable to provide the water that.
Potable or not potable?
It would be
Dry.
4 gallons a minute, not be sufficient.
Right.
Yeah, there would be a lot of unknowns, and I get that.
Let's just get this approved, if we'll approve the hydrant, at least that's a for sure. I mean, we would have liked to build a well, but definitely, if we were going to do it first, then we would have already known at this point to put it in a good well. But this is kind of hitting us where we're trying to start building a house. Initially, we were going to be building a house, and then we could have done this all during the process. And before C of O, we would have known about the well, we could have gone for water service. But this is kind of the cart before the horse type thing. So we don't know that the well can be 2,000 feet and 2 gallons. So at this point, I think that we should stick with the original. The hydrants and the meter sensor.
So essentially, you're asking for approval on everything within the existing city ordinance guidelines that,
Or the water service.
as far as the water service itself. And staff's recommendation on that is,
Well, I've told Mr. Main that the ordinance number 1813, the street improvement ordinance, is something that he'll have to address at the council.
Yeah.
So we've got
It's not something I can waive. I mean, this commission could make a recommendation to waive it, and we could take it to council that way, but
Yeah.
it still is an ordinance that the council has passed and approved, and ultimately they're the ones that have the final say.
you're talking for the street improvement portion of this,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so you also have to go through the hillside ordinance and the underground ordinance and the master drainage plan. So there's a lot of really unknowns at this. That's a given for you.
The hillside ordinance, I'm already aware of, I've talked to Mike, proposed about the percentage, based on slope, that's not a problem. We have more than enough, with the paths to be located not too low of the hill, which was our intention anyway, we don't want to disturb the side of the hillside. So, basically just the water problem for us.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with the water service part of it, you know. I agree that the street improvement is an excessive cost for one single-family home up there. How would that affect the existing drainage that's going down there now? You mentioned that they do have some issues there.
The street?
If it, as opposed to being improved or not improved in that area.
I guess if it weren't done right, it could exacerbate the drainage if it were concentrated and were allowed to shoot out there at the intersection. So that's something we would want the design engineer to look at.
Yeah. And you may want to go with the water at this point and then look into the street improvement at a later date, you know.
The actual right-of-way where the hydrant will be located is right at this bottom corner of the main parcel, and that's where the right-of-way ends for Camelback.
Mhm.
So it's going to be right at the end of the street, so it's not going to be like in the middle where, when and if the street improvements were ever done, it's not going to be in the middle where it would be a problem with the grade. The city parcel is from, like, the M and Camelback, that whole strip in between the street and that first home, that's all city parcel. That's the lower where the natural wash already goes. So if and when anybody that owned that parcel or whatever along the road was going to develop that side of that whole road where it comes down off the right of way, that would be the easiest way to keep the drainage going straight down that line right into the natural wash that goes down, and you can see it going through Christie 5.
Right.
So it's already been flowing like that for years. Whoever's going to design that street is going to keep it going the same way because it's the natural flow. It's the most cost effective.
Is a process in place here, Greg, to get him approved for the water service portion of this, and could he apply for variance on the street improvements for the 300 feet compared to the 1,600 feet that we're talking about?
Yeah, but I think he would want to know that before he gets too far
Right.
in this process.
He gave me the paperwork that I looked up that asks for the condition why you would ask for a variance.
Right.
I am aware of that, but I have to apply for it.
Yeah.
What conditions are associated with why you would ask for it.
Yeah, because it's a lot of expense there for the
Yeah,
difference.
I won't be doing it, but I can't afford it.
Right.
So I'd have to. You know, that I'd have to sell it land.
Right.
So if you were to subdivide that property, is the likelihood that the city would serve water to more parcels on there? Are they able to serve more parcels?
Yeah, it's within the limits of the city. It's within our water boundary. It's our policy to serve them with water.
Would that take another water storage tank maybe to pump up to at a higher level, and then they would
Yes.
have passive pressure there?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the improvement that would happen with his request, would that just facilitate his lot, or would it be sized to accommodate the future improvements?
Well, Mr. Main would have to do what he has to do for his lot, and then
Okay.
if the city wanted to do something above and beyond that, then we could talk about. At this point, again, we don't.
We've got one lot, right?
It's not on our radar. Yeah,
We've got one lot, so that would take a partial plat, and that would be further.
Yeah.
it would take
Review.
parcel or subdivision.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, are there any entertained motion by anyone or any more comments?
I'd make a motion to approve Mr. Main's request based on following the city guidelines that are in place at this time.
I second.
Okay. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Ayes, carry it. Okay, B on the agenda, review and discussion of development fees, development impact fees. At June 27, 2019 municipal utility meeting, the commissioners requested that the discussion regarding development impact fees may be added to the next month's meeting. Is that you?
Yes, well, yeah, I might ask Tina to come up. At this point, staff's been directed to I'll go out for a study to currently not have impact fees for our sewer, but nothing else. And at one point we had them for public safety, transportation, parks, water and sewer. And so the direction that staff has kind of received, and probably the reason for Mr. Orr bringing this up at last month's meeting, was we've been directed to go out and prepare an impact fee study. I don't have any other additional information at this point. We're just now talking, actually this morning, about putting a request for proposals, so an RFP together on that to find a company that does that sort of work and start the process.
Well, maybe we can postpone this and put it on another agenda item for another month in the future, just because Commissioner Orr and I thought it was Commissioner Shuffler wanted it. So I was going to say, since they're not here, it's probably important that they attend and be here for that discussion. So it would be.
Commissioner Orr brought it up initially.
Did he? Okay,
Oh, yeah.
that's what I
And
thought.
then
Probably
Mr.
trying to
Shuffler
passion.
continued.
Mr. Shuffler continued, and it was,
Yeah.
no, it's-
That's perfect.
So, and there's information on the previous study that was done and the previous ordinance that council passed, and so there's some philosophy in there on how they came up with those
Okay.
impact fee numbers for your reading pleasure.
So we'll reschedule that. Do we need to do a vote on that?
Yeah, I guess.
Make a motion.
I have one question on that. Like, so we've done impact fees, and so would we try and just hypothetically template that similarly to what we've done in the past, or are we looking for a new design completely on how we're going to apply these fees?
It's going to be new for
Okay.
the most part, because the fees are supposed to be based on an infrastructure improvement plan,
Right.
which is not quite a capital improvement plan, but very similar to a capital improvement plan. So it's a plan that basically has the needs of the city as far as transportation and drainage and parks and all that in mind. Some real projects identified and some costs associated with those projects, and that's supposed to be the basis for the impact fee, is to, as growth comes in, provide these necessary growth improvements.
Yeah, I think one of my concerns would be to make it a little bit more user-friendly to new businesses coming in, instead of maybe all up front, and hitting them right out of the gate or scaring them away because of the cost of those, to make it a little bit easier for them to pay that over time. Or I don't know what our policies were in the past on that, but I have heard that sometimes that scares businesses away from coming into our town, and we're trying to promote the growth. And
Yeah, the policy in the past was they were all collected at the time of building permit issuance,
right,
prior to building permit.
which can be some pretty substantial sums at that point. Yeah.
and we were talking about it being affected on homes,
Right.
and how it could drive people away from here to more local areas. When you start, well, to me, I look at it as a lot of people are moving here to retire or relax or in later times.
Mm-hmm.
And people said, well, they moved from California, maybe at least they have money. Well, not necessarily. When you look at like the sewer fees and all this other stuff that goes up over time, you're on fixed income.
Right.
So that's why I think we were bringing all this up in the last one.
Yeah. Yeah, that could definitely impact heavily the startup costs, and sometimes be a deal breaker for people where they might otherwise come in and take a chance on the business they're potentially going to do and be willing to pay it over time. It might be just something to consider, just a suggestion.
Yeah, and I don't know if when the city had the impact fees, whether there was anyone that ever looked at whether more homes were built in the county during those times, or just
Right.
outside the city limits where the impact fees weren't collected. I don't know if that's done. Maybe that's something that could be that as well.
That might be kind of an interesting look,
well,
to be honest with
yeah.
you, even right now with sewer versus, septic tank, to be honest with you, where people are looking to buy property and or moving with regards to tying them in, because we want to entice as many new home construction or builders or people moving in here, to tie into that sewer, so that's always kind of a concern, right?
Well, even in the county, though, the city's policy extends into the county on connecting to sewer for a new subdivision.
But sewer is not extensive in the county, so for the
Not
most
in-
part, it's
not in
usually
the
septic tank.
existing developed areas.
Yes, yeah. So that might be interesting to actually look at, so we might entertain that. So we will postpone this to a later date. Do we have a motion to
I'll
project that out to a
we
future?
postpone it out for another meeting.
Second.
Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, those opposed say nay. Ayes, carry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, number 5, announcements by commission members. Do we have any announcements? No? At this point in time, I'd like to also put out on the future agenda for the city workshop so that Commissioner Retberg can discuss the city workshop and what items you found at that workshop. And I think that was held, 4 weeks ago, something like that? So hopefully you took some
3.
notes,
Yes.
right? Wasn't that 4
No,
weeks ago?
there
or
was a
something?
big PowerPoint, so we'll try and get a copy of that and narrow it down.
Okay.
Or I'll just bring the sheets that we had there, put it in a packet where it was the PowerPoint put out.
Anything else, guys?
I have no comments.
I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion. Will you adjourn?
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Ayes, carry it.